Okay, so we have another video up here. The speaker here is District Attorney Rachael Rollins, and she's going to be talking about social justice and her changes in how she approaches crime in the Boston area. Let me go ahead and read a little bit about her. District Attorney Rachael Rollins is the Chief Law Enforcement Officer for Boston, Chelsea, Revere, and Winthrop, Massachusetts. This is a big area, okay? She is the first woman ever elected as district attorney in Suffolk County and the first woman of color ever elected to serve in this role in Massachusetts. And what we're going to find, she's going to be talking at length about some of the more recent events that have been taking place in terms of police brutality and Kyle Rittenhouse. And we're going to see her make a lot of mistakes. Hello out there. I am trying to get through.
With his powerful brainwaves cradled in the warmth of reasoning, it's time for Johnnie Walker Dread to straighten you out on a thing or two. Emanating all the way from exciting Las Vegas, Oklahoma, it's the Johnnie Walker Dread Show.
Zahara, Mia, and Mary, I'm very excited to be here. I did present some remarks, so I'm going to hopefully get through these quickly so we can get to questions, but I did put some thought into this.
Well, she put some thought into this, so you better pay attention. She's going to have it right. Intensive research. And she is an esteemed district attorney. Boy, she knows the law like the back of her hand, and the amount of time and effort she's poured into this, you can count on her words here as gold.
I am really honored to be with all of you today and to have an important discussion. I really believe conversations are important to implement change.
Yeah, conversations, as long as they're one-sided.
They're only the beginning. We need action. Earlier this week, we saw it. Derek Chauvin was found guilty for the murder of George Floyd. But this trial was incredibly painful to watch.
Especially for Derek Chauvin.
For some of us. This death was awful. It's difficult to read about even. And quite frankly, the fear I felt prior to the verdict coming speaks volumes with respect to certain communities and how little we expect from the criminal legal system.
So her fear was that he was going to get off. Okay.
I want people to realize that every time a Black person is murdered because of an interaction with the police that start with a nonviolent misdemeanor, the passing of a counterfeit $20 bill.
So get this straight. She is the district attorney. So how would you like to be a police chief working under her? So she's already got George Floyd here. And of course, the reason why George Floyd was killed was because a $20 bill.
Selling loose cigarettes or driving with an air freshener hanging from the rearview mirror.
Okay, so she's already got the first thing wrong. And she's talking about Daunte Wright. Daunte Wright was not shot over an air freshener. He was pulled over because he had an expired tag. And that's what police do to people who have expired tags. They pull them over and they write them a ticket. It's done all the time, every day of the year, hundreds of times throughout the year. People get pulled over for traffic violations and they get tickets. It's not like every time this happens, somebody gets shot over it. But you can see she's already made her first mistake. The air freshener deal was something that the police noticed when they walked up to the car. And they told him, Daunte Wright, you're not allowed to have that air freshener. When he talked to his mom, though, he blamed the traffic stop on the air freshener. He probably didn't want to tell his mom about the expired tag, but he also didn't want to tell his mother that he had a warrant out for his arrest. And that's what it was all about. It wasn't over the air freshener. It wasn't really over the expired tag. He had a warrant out for his arrest. Why did he get shot? It wasn't because of either of those small things. It was because he resisted arrest. He broke free from the cops and tried to get back in his car. Yes, the female officer should not have shot him. That was really a dumb thing she pulled off there. But make no mistake about it. His death was not over an air freshener, and it wasn't even over the expired tags. This is just really poor logic, and she should know better.
We should all feel that. There is interconnected trauma that is compounded with every new video we watch, every new trial there is. And I want you to know that these lives weren't lost, they were stolen. The road to equity is long and uneven, but there was accountability, at least for George Floyd. But I want to be very clear. A guilty verdict is not what George Floyd's family wants. They want George to be alive today. A guilty verdict is not what the Black community wants. We want our lives not to be the subject of debate and deliberation. What we all want is an end to police brutality and racial injustice.
Well, I would think that everybody wants into that because police are brutal to a lot of people, not just black people. Ask Daniel Shaver sometime. Oh, you can't. Okay. How about asking Dylan Noble in Fresno about, oh, well, you can't ask him either. There are plenty of examples where the police have been brutal to lots and lots of different ethnicities. It's not a race issue.
We want our lives to matter, for our bodies not to be the subject of state violence, for our stories to not be reduced to a trial. Reform isn't an isolated revolution. It requires us to have a profound reckoning with our past if we want a shot at building a more just and equitable future. If we do not change what we do and how we do it, it becomes who we are. That will be our legacy.
Yeah, this is standard boilerplate. How many times have we heard this crap? We have to look into the past. We have to examine ourselves. It's just the same junk you hear in all of these speeches.
Are we satisfied with the status quo where men like Kyle Rittenhouse are considered victims and men like Daunte Wright are considered criminals?
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. Kyle Rittenhouse. Some people are calling him a victim. Well, they're entitled to their opinion. Some people see him as a victim. I do. I think he's been persecuted beyond belief. But he has not been tried yet. And so you can't claim he's not a victim at this point because we haven't determined that. So if a person wants to have the belief that he is a victim, they're entitled to their belief. There's nothing wrong with holding that belief. Daunte Wright. Was he a victim? Was he a criminal? Well, he's been accused of some very serious crimes. So is Kyle. But you can't set this thing up as saying, well, Kyle, I can't believe that some people are calling him a victim, which implies that he must be a criminal, and then turn around and say, I can't believe that some people are calling Daunte Wright a criminal, which in fact he very well may be. And we know what? He had been accused of felony armed robbery of a woman inside her apartment and a gun charge. He was arrested because he had a warrant out for his arrest for that gun charge because he failed to appear in court. Now, is that a criminal? Well, I'll let you decide. But it's perfectly reasonable for someone to think that Kyle Rittenhouse is a victim and that Daunte Wright is a criminal. The big problem here is she just simply does not believe innocent until proven guilty. Has no belief in that. In her mind, Kyle is guilty, and anybody who claims otherwise is just so simply wrong that they've committed almost some sort of offense. And Daunte Wright is such a victim that anybody who claims that he's a criminal is just racist.
Do we want to accept a society where the same day George Floyd's life was vindicated, Ma'Khia Bryant's life was taken by another police officer?
As she was trying to stab another girl, a black female. Notice that she has no concern whatsoever for Ma'Khia Bryant's victim. None. All she can think about is Ma'Khia Bryant herself getting shot. And by the way, the original narrative about that is starting to look a little bit suspect. I would put my money on the fact that she did not call 911, that she instigated the aggression, and that she might have even gotten the knife from her father. Those are legal facts that would need to be investigated. Except in her mind, there is no need to investigate. Ma'Khia Bryant is a victim. She did nothing wrong in this lady's mind.
And of course, in the middle of the trial, Daunte Wright was murdered.
Daunte Wright was murdered. Keep in mind, this is the district attorney. She's in the same branch of service as the police department. And so she's basically calling the cops murderers. How would you like to work in the police under her?
10 miles from the courthouse. In the book To Kill a Mockingbird, Harper Lee noted that people generally see what they look for and hear what they listen for. So what are we looking for? Are we looking for someone to blame? Are we looking to reinforce a narrative that everyone has the same choices, the same opportunities, that everyone's treated the same in the eyes of the law? What if instead of looking for someone to blame, we started looking for something to change?
Gee, how about not looking for the police to blame? You're saying instead of looking for someone to blame, well, aren't you just blaming the police in every instance? Are you taking your own medicine here?
What if instead of putting Band-Aids on problems, we actually looked into the root causes of the wound?
Oh, we're going to now look into the root causes of the wound. Okay, let's see here. She is a district attorney. She has an education. She has done a lot of research for this upcoming speech here. Let's see if she gets to the real root causes.
Wouldn't that stop the bleeding? What if instead of investing in prisons, policing, and surveillance more and more, we instead invested more money into education, more money into intervention, more money into community partnerships?
Yeah, we've been saying that for 50 years now. You know what? It isn't going to make any difference. Criminals will be criminals.
Wouldn't that lead to safer, healthier, and more thriving communities? Accountability does not always equal incarceration. Wealth should never dictate liberty, and treatment should not always be subordinate to punishment. This is not just some theoretical policy shift. We've done this in Suffolk County, and it works. We know tough on crime policies are relics of the past, and smart on crime policies are the way to a more equitable future. We know this because the data backs it up.
Every year we get the new data that comes out and proves that our system is working. And then 10 years later, what? Tons of crime. It's still there. That's what happens when you have dishonest science. Every year, everything is better and better and better because the policies that we implemented are really working. But then you come back 10 years later, and guess what? People still getting robbed. People still getting murdered. Doesn't change.
Recent study in the National Bureau of Economic Research confirms that by not prosecuting low-level misdemeanors, we actually decrease the likelihood of that potential defendant's involvement in the criminal legal system.
Well, yeah, if you don't prosecute him, you decrease his chances of being involved with the police, of course. I mean, if you want to see armed robberies diminish, make armed robbery legal. Guess what? You come back a year later, you find out there's no armed robbery in this city anymore. Amazing that our policy has worked so well. But I have another issue here. She says, by not prosecuting misdemeanors, then what the hell do you do with the misdemeanors? I mean, really, a person is running around with no brake lights. What are you going to do? Going to pull them over? Well, there's a violation right there. She would object to that. You can't pull them over. That's racist. Person might be a black person. And by pulling him over, you're increasing his contact with the police, which could lead to a terrible tragedy, and therefore you should not pull him over. So what are you going to do? Let him run around with no brake lights? I guess that's a solution. But it's kind of strange because we require that the automotive manufacturers put these brake lights in cars for a reason. And it doesn't do any good to mandate that if you let people run around with no brake lights. You could say, well, what we'll do is we'll make him fix it. Yeah, what if he doesn't? We can do then. Well, we'll send him a fine in the mail. Yeah, what if he doesn't pay it? What are you going to do? At some point, the rubber has to hit the road here. When a person refuses to obey the law, you have to do something about it. And she has no answer for that.
Reducing the prosecution of nonviolent misdemeanors reduces racial disparities, recidivism, and the likelihood that the misdemeanor ends in murder.
Look at what she's just said. Reducing the prosecution of misdemeanors reduces the racial disparity in crimes. She's basically saying that black people commit lots of crime. That's what she said. And the way to make it even is to not prosecute them for it. And at that point, they're not being impacted by the police to any more extent than white people. I cannot believe that a district attorney would make such a statement.
This policy change is the difference between life and death. It could have made the difference for George Floyd, for Eric Gardner, for Daunte Wright, each of whom was killed because of a misdemeanor.
Okay, so George Floyd, what we're saying is counterfeiting, don't prosecute it. If a person is trying to pass a counterfeit bill, don't prosecute it. Well, what do you think is going to happen to counterfeiting? The health of our currency is based on the fact that the bills are genuine. And so the police are called out there to investigate. You might have a major counterfeiting operation going on here. How are you going to know if you don't investigate? Think about the counterfeiter's dream here. I can counterfeit money, give it out to all my minions to basically launder into the community completely uninhibited. Because the people that are carrying this thing out are not going to be prosecuted for anything. So the police are not going to come out. The police aren't going to come out and investigate if there's no chance of arresting anyone. I mean, they're not into thankless tasks. Thankless tasks. And think about Daunte Wright. He was pulled over for, guess what? Expired tags. Police pulling people over expired tags anymore? Then how are you going to collect any revenue from people? That's why we have it. There's a purpose for that. And so what you're basically saying is that we're going to have a fee for registering your vehicle unless you don't want to pay it.
Critics claim that progressive prosecutors prioritize defendants over victims. Not only is that inaccurate, it is offensive. Here's the truth. Today's victim can be tomorrow's defendant and was likely yesterday's witness. Anyone who does not understand that doesn't understand the cyclical nature of the criminal legal system in certain communities.
Basically, she's laying down the excuses for not prosecuting people. Let me say this, and this is how I'm going to end it. When you have a store owner who's invested his life savings, and he has a family just like everybody else, and people like this person just allows people to walk in and steal whatever they want. And that's what she's advocating. Petty theft is a misdemeanor. Low-level crime. Nonviolent. How much does society value that store owner when it allows people to just simply take whatever they want from him? So when you have a person walk in and grab a whole bunch of stuff and walk out, and she fails to prosecute that person, all she can think about are the good things that she's done for that person, for the thief. She'll get all misty-eyed how she has given this person an opportunity to better themselves, to keep them out of the incarceration cycle. But what about the store owner? What message does she send to him? Basically, you have no value. All that work that you did to create that store has no respect amongst her minions. They don't care. So she is what happens when you have a district attorney who can only worry about the criminals. She cares more for the criminals' welfare than she does for law-abiding citizens. And she talks about the root cause of all these problems. I'm telling you, she's missing that. The root cause of these problems is not the criminal justice system, it's family. The family has broken down. All you have to do is look at all of these recent events, and there's a common denominator. Ma'Khia Bryant, take a look at the clown show that her family was. Parents separated, paternity suit, she's living in a foster home. That's what led to the violence. It had nothing to do with the criminal justice system. The jail system didn't drive Ma'Khia Bryant to try to stab another person, and it didn't drive those other people to be at her house. It was a breakdown in the family. And you go one by one, and you examine the families involved in these incidences, and you'll see a common pattern. It doesn't always apply, but I would bet that about 9 out of 10 it does. There's another root cause. Drugs. I'm not talking about the crimes that drugs cause, but I'm talking about the state of mind it puts people in that causes them to interact with the police in very unfortunate ways. Terrence Crutcher, here in Oklahoma, stops his vehicle in the middle of the street, blocking traffic both ways, and gets out and walks down the street. He's nuts. Police pull up. One of the officers puts her gun on him. What does he do? Most normal people would just simply say, okay, get their hands up. Police have got the guns on me. Hey, what do you want me to do? But not him. No, he walks back to his car, his SUV or truck, SUV, I believe, and reaches into it. So she opens fire. She doesn't know if she's going to pull out a gun. Now, was she a little bit itchy on the trigger finger? Perhaps. However, why did he do such strange things? Because he was on PCP. Stephon Clark, same thing, laid out at night. Does everything in his power to get shot by the police. Pulls out a cell phone at night, points it at the police officers as if it's a gun, and they open fire and they kill him. Guess what? They run a toxicology report on him and stoned. Philando Castile gets pulled over for a brake light. But it wasn't the brake light that killed Philando. It was that he was stoned. He reached for a gun. The officer told him not to. He couldn't process the officer's commands. He kept reaching for it, and the police officer opened the fire on him. Was the police officer in the wrong a little? I think he might have been a little bit itchy trigger finger, too. But Philando Castile is not dead because of the criminal justice system. He's dead because he was stoned. And by the way, his wife claimed that he wasn't reaching for his gun, that he was reaching for his wallet. Okay, I understand that. But at the same time, when the police officer is yelling at you, don't reach for it, most normal people would say, okay, I'm going to put my hands back on the steering wheel. But he didn't. He kept reaching for whatever he was reaching for because he was stoned. Impairment is killing a lot of these people, and people like her don't understand that. And the other one is the breakdown of the family. Those two things are intersecting, and they're causing a lot of people to get shot. That's the root cause. Like my video and subscribe to my channel.